Heroes often have great responsibility with great power. However, not everyone capable in this world can become a hero. Johnny, like many ordinary boys, dreamed of becoming a hero. At night, his mother urged him to turn off the light and sleep. But as soon as she left the room, the light turned back on. This happened several times. Her temper flared. Johnny insisted it wasn't him. She didn't believe his ghost stories. But then the lights flickered on their own. A power outage finally proved Johnny's innocence. After his mother left, Johnny suddenly thought he might have awakened superpowers. He first tried to control a toy car, then the streetlights of the entire village. He was now sure he had superpowers. The next day, the usually timid Johnny stood up boldly. He secretly used his power to break the bully's radio. During lunch break, he told his friend Tommy about his newfound abilities and his hope to become a superhero who saves the world. Tommy offered to become a superhero photographer to document Johnny's journey. While they discussed superheroes, Johnny's crush approached, expressing her fondness for superheroes. Wanting to get closer to her, Johnny, following Tommy's advice, decided to pick a hero name and even designed a superhero costume. Although it didn't look great, after some tweaking, the final version of the Electro Boy costume was a success. In the following evenings, they began practicing how to use superpowers outside. After managing to fly with some effort, Johnny donned the Electro Boy costume, planning to impress his crush. However, since his superpowers had just awakened and were not fully under control, he fell from the sky into a swimming pool. A powerful electric current was released from Johnny, causing people to panic and flee. Disaster ensued as a fuel tanker overturned to avoid pedestrians and exploded, throwing the entire town into chaos. Afterwards, Johnny was devastated. He only wanted to win his crush's heart and had no intention of causing harm. Yet, with such strong abilities, if he couldn't be a hero, what could he do? At that moment, his released electric current caused an ATM to eject cash. It was then that he decided to become a genuine villain. Time quickly advanced to several years later. In a supermax prison housing countless supervillains, the boy who once dreamed of being a superhero had become a repeat offender. Today was Johnny's release day. His multiple incarcerations had allowed him to build good relationships with fellow inmates, one of whom had even developed a fondness for the charismatic Johnny. However, Johnny now had a girlfriend. As Johnny reached the final checkpoint, the vest suppressing his powers was removed. His sentence was complete. The prison staff asked if he would come back to visit. Johnny declared he would not return to the supermax prison again. As the prison gates opened, the glaring sun hit his face. His girlfriend, Casey, had been waiting at the prison gates for a long time. They embraced and kissed deeply upon meeting. Johnny was no longer the naive boy he once was. 8 months of loneliness had fueled their passion. And who could resist a girlfriend who could drive one-handed? Back at home, they planned to continue where they left off. But unexpectedly, Johnny's friend sneaked into his house. They warmly embraced, and these friends were also villains. Their visit wasn't just to celebrate Johnny's release, but also to tempt him to join their crew. They planned to use their diverse abilities to rob 10 jewelry stores on the streets of San Francisco, a city with few superheroes. They believed that with enough speed, the police wouldn't be able to stop them. At that moment, Casey interrupted their plans. She suggested Johnny start with an ordinary job as a transition, but her suggestion was mocked by the others. With no other option, Casey used her powers to trap the 3 men in an illusion, wanting some alone time with Johnny. It turned out Casey was also a superpower user. Her reason for controlling the 3 to leave was not just to fulfill her own desires, but also to prevent Johnny from rejoining these low-level villains and risking arrest just after being released. In Casey's view, a plan with disproportionate risks and rewards was not worth venturing into. More importantly, the trio's plan originated from an online network that was highly dubious. This network never directly engaged in crimes but provided plans to villains and extracted hefty commissions from them. After hearing Casey's perspective, Johnny verbally agreed not to join his friend's scheme, planning to commit a significant heist later and then retire. However, the very next day, he began the jewelry robbery plan with his friends. This robber was audacious. Surrounded by a swarm of police, he simply snapped his fingers, and all the police cars were incapacitated. Just moments ago, Johnny had robbed 10 jewelry stores. Everything was going according to plan, until they encountered another group of robbers who, due to their unprofessionalism, triggered an alarm. Realizing the danger, they prepared to retreat quickly. However, since Johnny and his group were known criminals, the police quickly identified them and launched a citywide manhunt. Upon hearing that superpowered individuals were involved in the robbery, The police were motivated to capture the criminals before any superheroes arrived. However, they underestimated them. Although Johnny and his colleagues were considered third-rate villains, their ability to coordinate was formidable. Faced with police blockades, Johnny briefly used his powers to disable all the police vehicles, easily leading his group through the encirclement. At a police checkpoint in a tunnel, Transmit used his teleportation skills to instantly move the group past the barriers. Frostbite, wearing a respirator, created an ice path, making it easy for their motorcycles to glide over and quickly escape the police. Kismet, wearing a red mask, could bring misfortune to others, matching his name, but often accidentally harmed his teammates due to his inability to control his powers. At that moment, the superhero Man Mountain descended from the sky. Despite his massive size, he was surprisingly fast. However, Johnny was not intimidated by such a third-rate hero and was the first to attack him. Frostbite quickly followed up with additional damage, but their attacks had almost no effect on Man Mountain. Seeing this, Kismet unleashed his ability, causing several planes in the sky to crash under his curse of misfortune, accurately striking Man Mountain on the head. Man Mountain then unfortunately crashed into a nearby biochemical plant, losing his ability to move. Just as Johnny was about to celebrate their apparent victory, a strange ball launched an attack on them. Rubber Ball, a newly debuted superhero, might seem like a clown with his bouncing around, but his powers were formidable. In his ball form, not only was his speed and destructive power significant, but he also possessed strong defensive capabilities. However, he was not considered a true ally of justice due to his reckless disregard for civilian safety, a behavior so disgraceful that even the villain Frostbite found it shameful. Rubber Ball found an opportunity and smashed Transmit's motorcycle, but this destruction did not satisfy him. Eager to capture Johnny and his group quickly, he began to recklessly destroy nearby buildings, using the collapsing structures to hinder their progress. Although Johnny and his group were not strong fighters, their ability to escape was exceptionally skilled. With the cooperation of Transmit and Frostbite, they managed to escape without harm. On the ice path, Johnny also took the opportunity to give Rubber Ball a taste of electricity. However, after a brief recovery, Rubber Ball caught up again, but was more cautious about approaching Johnny. Seeing this, Kismet unleashed his curse, causing various metal beams to fall from the sky. Yet these attacks did not stop Rubber Ball. As he was about to catch up again, Johnny devised a plan. He used Transmit's teleportation ability to transport Frostbite's attack right next to Rubber Ball. This move was very effective. Rubber Ball's right hand was frozen, causing him to fall to the ground. Johnny wasted no time and released a current of electricity, putting an end to the nuisance. Just when the group thought they were finally safe and began planning where to go next, an unexpected event occurred. They were mysteriously teleported to a distant location, and it was not due to a mishap by Transmit. Instead, it was the doing of the mysterious man before them. This man is the most outrageous superhero. It's already extraordinary for a normal person to awaken one superpower, but he possesses a whopping 200 different superpowers. If his powers weren't triggered randomly, I would suspect he is the illegitimate son of a god. Praetorian immediately unleashed his first ability, creating a burst of fire, and then produced 3 duplicates of himself. This scene left Johnny and his group dumbfounded, and they quickly scattered to escape. However, Praetorian was indifferent, treating this as merely a game of cat and mouse. Frostbite was the first to be caught. Facing Praetorian alone, Frostbite launched a freezing attack, but Praetorian countered with flames from his mouth, catching Frostbite off guard. What followed was a one-sided onslaught, giving Frostbite a quick trip from heaven to hell. Meanwhile, Kismet was also caught by Praetorian. Knowing he couldn't escape, he unleashed a powerful curse. However, Praetorian randomly activated a rebound shield, causing Kismet to suffer the consequences of his own curse as a shark appeared in the sky and bit at him. As for Johnny, he attempted to flee with Transmit. Unexpectedly, Praetorian also randomly acquired the teleportation skill. To prevent their escape, he first knocked down Transmit with a kick, then teleported next to Johnny and delivered a dizzying punch. Recovering, Johnny counterattacked. Suddenly, the surrounding cars turned on their headlights, flashing in Praetorian's eyes. Johnny tried to escape but was blocked by the 3 duplicates. Seeing this, Johnny challenged Praetorian to a fair one-on-one battle, prompting the confident Praetorian to recall his duplicates. At that moment, Praetorian suddenly asked Johnny if he had just been released from Supermax prison. Johnny, unsure of Praetorian's intentions, admitted that he had just gotten out yesterday. Praetorian seemed surprised, and mentioned that it would be unfair to send them back right after getting out, so he decided to give them a chance to reform. Then, Praetorian flew away from the scene. Johnny and his group were puzzled, wondering since when superheroes had become so lenient. The next second, Casey arrived in her car and quickly whisked Johnny away. It turned out that Praetorian's unusual behavior was influenced by Casey's superpowers. However, her ability wasn't foolproof. It could fail against someone with strong mental resistance, especially someone like Praetorian with his random abilities and many uncertainties. Back home, Casey seemed uneasy. She advised Johnny not to continue mixing with his dubious friends, warning that his future could end up being spent in prison. However, Casey wasn't exactly honest herself. She believed that a powerful supervillain should pull off a big heist and then retire to a happy life. Johnny had thought about this too, but such opportunities were not easy to come by. However, Casey had a major deal in mind. They say true masters hide in plain sight, concealing their skills and fame. The seemingly ordinary old man turned out to be the legendary supervillain Carmine. Rumored to have committed numerous crimes in the 1970s without ever harming a soul, he was dubbed the strongest gentleman thief by the public. His stories are still told in the city after all these years, and he is Casey's mentor. Now, Carmine has received a commission from an overseas employer, needing additional hands for a big job. With Casey's introduction, Johnny could join this crew. However, upon meeting Carmine, Johnny doubted whether this old man hiding in an underground laundromat could really be the famed supervillain. Johnny quickly spotted an old poster on the wall, and learned that Carmine wasn't as formidable as depicted on TV. He had been arrested several times. Surprisingly, Carmine was just an ordinary person without superpowers, relying solely on his dual guns for his criminal exploits. How then did he become a legend? Carmine didn't hide the truth. He attributed his legendary status to starting early, when supervillains didn't need superpowers. Being in the right place at the right time was enough, and people would fill in the gaps with their imaginations. Over time, Carmine became an idealized figure among villains. The scene shifts to a man in a cap, who stealthily takes car keys from a woman's bag. His odd behavior catches the attention of another man, who is unaware of it. Just as he plans to drive away in the woman's sports car, he receives a call from Carmine, but a superhero has also taken notice of him. This man named TK is a telekinetic. He is currently targeted by the superhero Gladiator for theft. TK uses his telekinesis to control shipping containers to attack Gladiator. However, these slow attacks fail to reach Gladiator, who seizes the opportunity to defeat him. Meanwhile, in an underground casino, two men start a brawl over cheating in a game, causing the surrounding gamblers to scatter in fear. Unexpectedly, the brawlers are actually brothers who staged the fight to steal chips amidst the chaos. Then, their phone rings. They too receive a call from Carmine. Who are these people? It turns out they are accomplices gathered by Carmine for a mission. Once everyone arrives, Carmine explains that with the rise of superhero organizations, the number of heroes with superpowers has surged, leaving villain groups with little business. Additionally, joining the corresponding villain networks requires paying high commissions. Everyone present shares one trait: they are not members of any villain network. Their minor crimes usually don't attract the attention of the superhero leagues, making them ideal for this operation. In Josh's words, everyone present is just a third-rate unknown. Hearing this, Johnny can't hold back. He activates his power, causing all electrical systems nearby to shut down, plunging the area into darkness, illuminated only by the electricity emanating from him. Josh, not to be outdone, passes through Johnny's body, revealing his ability to phase through anything. As for the Diesel brothers, their power is similar to Deadpool's, possessing nearly indestructible healing abilities. After understanding each other's powers, the plan finally moves to its main phase. This mission, issued by a foreign tycoon, offers a reward of $50 million with a partial deposit already paid. Trust in Carmine, combined with such a lucrative reward, convinces everyone to join. However, before proceeding, Carmine states that they need to rescue an indispensable team member, TK, the telekinetic, who has been arrested by Gladiator. How does one hijack a fully armed plane at 10,000 meters in the air, especially one guarded by a superhero? Does it require the luck to land precisely on the plane, or the strength to defeat a hero? Just recently, the plane transporting TK to a supermax prison took off, with Gladiator, the captor, ensuring its safe escort. It seemed like wishful thinking for anyone to try to rescue TK. Meanwhile, at a private airport, a negligent receptionist was slacking off. When faced with Carmine's inquiries, the receptionist responded dismissively. Suddenly, Johnny appeared, claiming someone had been sucked into the plane's propeller. The terrified receptionist rushed to check, finding the crew baffled by the debris on the ground. During the confusion, Johnny and Carmine sneaked into the airport. Josh had already entered the plane and subdued the pilot. After dealing with the pilot, Sammy brought pieces of Roddy onto the plane. Even when chopped up, Roddy could regenerate his flesh and blood in a very short time. Carmine and Johnny entered the cockpit to start the plane and prepare for takeoff. As for Casey, she was already on a speedboat, waiting at sea. Eventually, they caught up with the prisoner transport plane. The pilot of the transport noticed something odd with the communication equipment, a result of Johnny using his ability. Although he could control the plane's electrical systems, he was unable to unlock TK's restraints, which were specifically designed to inhibit superpowers. Immediately, the Diesel brothers sprung into action. Sammy jumped directly from the plane's door, but unfortunately got caught in the propeller, confusing Gladiator. Next, Roddy, wielding a hammer, struck at Gladiator. Sadly, the difference in their strength was too great, and he was knocked down by Gladiator. However, Roddy quickly recovered. While Gladiator was distracted, Josh stealthily entered the aircraft's cabin. The guards, realizing the intrusion, opened fire wildly, but Josh dodged all bullets using his superpowers. Once the enemies had exhausted their ammunition, Josh used a stun gun to take down all the guards. On the other side, due to the vast disparity in their abilities, Roddy could only rely on his agility to engage with the opponent. Even if caught, there was no need to worry, as taking hits was his forte. His exceptional healing ability was perfect for holding Gladiator off. Meanwhile, the pilot sensed trouble and was nearly scared to death upon turning around. Thinking quickly, he tried to speed up the flight to seek reinforcements from headquarters. Seeing this, Johnny immediately used his powers to restrict the plane's acceleration. While Roddy continued to hold Gladiator at bay, it seemed Josh was having trouble. He could not unlock the restraints on TK. At that moment, dark clouds appeared in the sky, making the battle in the rain even more challenging. Gladiator, frustrated by being held back by Roddy, snapped Roddy's arm. Just as Gladiator let his guard down, Roddy's arm began to regrow. He lunged at Gladiator and stretched his other hand to whip into the propeller. Instantly, both were swept into the sea. Despite this, Gladiator remained unharmed. However, in the sea, he encountered mermaids from a mermaid kingdom seeking his help to defeat a great demon. As a hero committed to justice, Gladiator had no reason to refuse, and followed the mermaids, unaware that this was just an illusion woven by Casey. On the other side, Josh struggled unsuccessfully to break TK's restraints. As the plane neared the Supermax prison, and even Carmine considered abandoning the rescue, Johnny had an idea. He increased the power output, causing the transport plane to lose control and plummet towards the ground. He did this to force the guard's hand. If they didn't want to die in a crash, they would have to release the code. Now, releasing TK was the only way to save everyone. To save their lives, the guards chose to free TK. Just a second before the plane crashed, TK used his telekinesis to hover the plane. With this, the mission's team was nearly complete, lacking only one more member. At this point, Carmine no longer kept secrets and revealed to everyone that their target was right in front of them. Looking around, the group saw nothing unusual, except Casey by the window, who seemed to have noticed something. Could their target be at the headquarters of the Hero League? Learning the truth, everyone thought Carmine was insane. The plan seemed no different from seeking death. However, Carmine explained that within the League, there was a superhero named Brainwave, who could sense people's thoughts over a vast range. Normally, they would have already been detected by Brainwave, but their safety indicated that Brainwave was not at the headquarters. He was attending a superhero award ceremony. This presented a rare opportunity. Their only task was to steal the helmet of the supervillain Count Orlok, who was also the mission's sponsor. Count Orlok was once one of the top supervillains in the world, capable of almost anything within reason. However, due to his high profile, he was eventually subdued by the founders of the League. His helmet, which enhances mental powers, was taken as a trophy and displayed at the League's headquarters. Although Orlok soon escaped from prison, without his equipment, he was like a tiger without teeth. Meanwhile, Forecast was walking in the rain, yet strangely, not a single drop touched him. He was the 8th member of the team, able to control the weather. Now that everything was ready, Carmine was very confident that his plan would succeed. Under Carmine's persuasion, everyone agreed to join the operation. It was set to be a sleepless night, with no one having the heart to sleep. Similarly, the head of the villain network organization, Bastard, was not sleeping either, as he was busy handing over his duties to his deputy, Salamander. Unexpectedly, the villain headquarters was hidden right behind the Supermax prison. With many celebrities gathered there, Bastard arrived and announced his retirement, handing over the organization to Salamander. After delivering his final speech, Bastard left amid the applause of many super criminals. Before leaving, he instructed his subordinates to note who stopped clapping first. Outside the prison, Bastard used his ability to remotely execute those who had displeased him. This couple was on a date in a cemetery when suddenly they were terrified. Countless corpses began to rise from their graves. Just as they thought they were doomed, all the zombies mounted bicycles and surged towards the city center. Such an absurd scene seemed perfect for an episode of The Walking Dead. Soon, a zombie bicycle race trended online. Several superheroes, hearing the news, rushed to handle the zombie crisis. Meanwhile, after the superheroes left, Johnny and others entered the League headquarters disguised as tourists. As you might have guessed, this so-called zombie crisis was just a ruse orchestrated by TK, using his telekinesis, combined with Forecast's weather control abilities, to lure the heroes out of the headquarters. In reality, it would soon become apparent that these zombies were actually harmless corpses. On the other side, Johnny and his team began their operation. First, Johnny used his abilities to control the surveillance system, replacing live feeds with pre-recorded videos. Casey was responsible for altering the memories of other tourists to match the recordings. They quickly made their way to the exhibition room, which displayed many famous pieces of equipment. To save time, they focused on the helmet. Josh swiftly used his powers to retrieve the helmet. Unexpectedly, the superhero Praetorian, who had been slacking off and not gone out, randomly acquired super hearing at that moment. From several floors away, he overheard the conversations of Carmine and the others. Praetorian immediately went to the location and saw the helmet floating in mid-air. He quickly used another power to knock Josh down. At the same time, the Count Orlok helmet also shattered, revealing that the trophies on display were fakes. The real treasures were hidden in an underground vault. Hearing this, Josh immediately went underground to search for the real items. Although Praetorian didn't know how Josh disappeared, his indiscriminate attacks soon led to Casey being knocked out while trying to protect Johnny. With Casey down, the rest of the group was exposed to Praetorian. This man was seen as a hero by everyone. But the next moment, after gaining laser eyes, he turned into a Homelander and began a massacre. Just then, Praetorian realized that the surveillance had been tampered with. Without any hesitation, he dropped his disguise and went into an unrestrained frenzy. Unknown to him, all his actions were being recorded by a boy with a smartphone. Roddy and Sammy tried to take on Praetorian, but were no match for him. Meanwhile, Carmine, glancing at his watch, realized they were running out of time. Fortunately, Josh had already entered the underground vault to search for the helmet. Simultaneously, Utopian and a group of superheroes arrived at the scene of the zombie outbreak. Since these zombies were just telekinetically controlled puppets, they couldn't fight back effectively. However, there were too many of them. Thankfully, Molecule Master, who can alter the molecular structure of materials, turned the zombies' clothes into steel, immobilizing them instantly. At that moment, the Necromancer, controlled by TK, emerged from the background. Utopian immediately pursued him into the sky for a face-to-face confrontation. From a distance, TK and Forecast prepared to secretly interfere, but suddenly a tall figure blocked their path. It was Gladiator, who had previously arrested TK. Fortunately, he did not recognize TK's face, mistaking the two for civilians and urging them to leave quickly. With TK no longer controlling the Necromancer, Utopian found a flaw and successfully defeated him. Although he sensed something was off during the fight, as the leader of the League, he would not admit he had been manipulated. Meanwhile, Praetorian was wreaking havoc at the League headquarters, turning it into a battlefield. In this critical moment, Josh finally found the helmet. Praetorian unleashed flames intending to finish everyone off. Fortunately, Johnny activated the fire suppression system, extinguishing the flames and creating a mist. Seizing this opportunity, Carmine signaled Josh to quickly put on the helmet, as it was their only chance to escape. As the smoke cleared, Praetorian reappeared. In the nick of time, Josh put on the helmet, recited a spell, and made a wish under Carmine's guidance. Instantly, a golden light enveloped Johnny and his group, transporting them to Black Rock Castle, the domain of Count Orlok. The butler welcomed them with fine wine. With the helmet back in his possession, Count Orlok could undoubtedly become a top-tier supervillain again. He planned to form a new villain alliance with Carmine and others. Just when they thought everything was going smoothly, Praetorian followed them, this time randomly acquiring the ability to stop time, rendering everyone immobile. It turned out that Praetorian was actually an underling of the villain organization leader. Blackrock Castle, being the headquarters of the original villains, was well known to Bastard. Though he had retired, learning that Count Orlok was about to retrieve the helmet and potentially threaten his dark forces, Bastard felt compelled to act. He first used his head-exploding ability on the butler. As Count Orlok awoke on the roof, he seemed confused about the situation and, unsurprisingly, was killed by Bastard. After settling everything, Bastard, uninterested in dealing with Johnny and the other lesser villains, took the money and the helmet and left. The group, frustrated and powerless, could only regret their situation. After much hardship, Johnny and his team completed their task, only to be betrayed by Bastard and Praetorian. Not only did they kill their employer, but they also stole the payment. Following the failed mission, Johnny and his team drowned their sorrows in alcohol, especially when they saw Praetorian mocking them as second-rate villains in an interview. Despite their anger, they were helpless. Subsequently, the group disbanded. On the way back, Casey's suppressed emotions finally erupted. She had prepared for years, hoping to make a big score and retire comfortably, but it didn't turn out as expected. Seeing Casey's disappointment, Johnny made the most important decision of his life. He proposed to her in front of a church. He said, "If we can't live a wealthy life, I'm willing to be an ordinary person and grow old with you." Johnny formed a ring out of electricity and placed it on Casey's finger, which momentarily lightened their spirits. Upon returning home, Johnny shaved his beard, ready to start anew. Unexpectedly, his friends, upon hearing the news, dragged him out for one last celebration. However, being broke, they were soon kicked out of a nightclub. Remembering his wedding was the next day, and not wanting to disappoint Casey with his poverty, Johnny briefly returned to his old ways. Despite intending to stop, his inebriated friends egged him on, leading them to don disguises and start robbing ATMs nearby. When Johnny saw a library, he thought of Casey studying for her MBA and decided to steal some relevant books as a gift. However, their actions caused too much noise and soon attracted police attention. The group fled into a subway station to escape the police chase. Unfortunately, running with Kismet meant a bad ending was likely, as Praetorian, Johnny's nemesis, was patrolling nearby. Today was supposed to be the happiest day for this woman, but the next moment she threw her wedding dress into a trash can and left without looking back. Just then, Johnny, who should have been at the wedding, was being chased by police across the town for using his superpowers to commit crimes. They had a chance to escape, but his nemesis appeared. As the train passed, Praetorian used his penetrating powers to enter the carriage. Unsurprisingly, everyone except Johnny was caught on the spot. Johnny used his powers to lock the train doors and ran towards the exit, but he never expected Gladiator to have been waiting for him there for a long time. Johnny was arrested, and once again locked up in a Supermax prison. 5 years have passed, and the most significant change has been with Praetorian. After his actions of killing civilians at the League headquarters were exposed, he was promptly expelled from the League, even implicating his close associate, Gladiator. On the other side, Carmine was lucky, winning consistently in gambling. However, his peculiar behavior soon caught the attention of the casino manager, Salamander, who ordered his staff to inspect the premises. They quickly discovered Carmine's accomplice, a punk man who could predict the future 30 seconds ahead. After catching them cheating, Salamander had them severely beaten, and in a ruthless move, killed Carmine's accomplice on the spot. As for Carmine, Salamander gave him a month to come up with $100 million to spare his life, intending to deter others from causing trouble in his casino. Meanwhile, Johnny has been released from prison, but Casey no longer wants anything to do with him. Johnny tried to change the subject, but ended up making matters worse. It turned out Casey also had a tough life. She had been performing poorly in her MBA program and was harassed by a professor, which led her to drop out. At that moment, a desperate Carmine interrupted their conversation. After learning about Carmine's situation, they each had their own ideas. Johnny planned to reunite their old gang for one last job, while Casey suggested sending Carmine abroad for asylum. Over the 5 years, everyone else's lives had also stabilized. Josh made some achievements in his career and became an architect. The telekinetic TK got married, had children, and became a mover. Forecast, the weather manipulator, continued his usual routine, making a living by selling umbrellas. The Diesel brothers earned their living through underground fighting. Although all of them were villains, they remained loyal to each other. Hearing about Carmine's troubles, They all decided to help. Seeing that all members were back, Casey also agreed to join in and help. However, before they could start their plan, they needed one more essential person to join their team. People always say not to date online because you never know if the other person might be a balding middle-aged man. However, today, it's this very man who has fallen victim to an online romance scam. Just recently, to help Carmine achieve his goal of making $1 billion in a month, Johnny gathered all the villain members again for a big heist. But first, they needed a helper, and that person was Gladiator. Johnny had heard various rumors about Gladiator while in prison, including that he was gay and liked to secretly cheat. Gladiator, in an attempt to meet Johnny, even sent several selfies. When his secrets were exposed, Gladiator was furious, but restrained himself due to the presence of many paparazzi. Seeing this, Johnny revealed his true intention. If Gladiator helped with the robbery, he would delete all the photos upon successful completion. Gladiator initially wanted to refuse, but agreed upon hearing who the target was. On a remote eastern island, there is a casino that neither the villain organization nor the Hero League can interfere with. This casino is run by two supervillains, Bastard and the former superhero Praetorian, who amass wealth by exploiting gamblers. Johnny's target this time is this casino. To avoid drawing attention, Johnny, Casey, and Josh flew to the island while the Diesel brothers were smuggled inside a suitcase. The others took a ferry, and halfway through, TK used his telekinesis to transport them to the island. Gladiator, being the strongest, swam there himself. With everyone assembled, they rested for the night and prepared to act the next day. Casey and Roddy disguised themselves as researchers to visit Bastard, ostensibly to seek investment, but actually to get the layout of the casino. This casino was not simple. It could detect and neutralize the powers of superhumans. Upon meeting Bastard, they pitched a project to create a time machine, claiming it could allow one to traverse different time periods and become the ultimate villain. However, Bastard, who had long retired, showed no interest in the project. For him, his collection of unique paintings that could transcend time was far more valuable. Unsurprised by Bastard's lack of interest, Casey left naturally. That evening, Casey shared the intelligence gathered, and after studying a 3D model of the casino, they quickly identified their target, the vault on the lowest level of the casino, containing a briefcase filled with a nation's worth of riches. Johnny, who had heard about such security systems while in prison, claimed he could give the team 10 minutes to operate. With a plan in place, the group celebrated in advance. However, the next day, Casey suddenly backed out. But with the plan set in motion, they had no choice but to proceed. They split into two teams. One headed to the underground vault, and the other to breach the security system. Josh quickly neutralized the casino's surveillance using his abilities. Next, they needed to implant a virus in the system before proceeding to the vault. Meanwhile, as soon as Johnny and his team sneaked underground, they triggered an alarm, and several ninja guards appeared before them. Inside a small briefcase lay the life's fortune of the head of a villainous network organization. How did Johnny manage to overcome numerous challenges to get here? Not long ago, Johnny and his team sneaked into the tunnel leading to the vault, but they triggered an alarm upon entry and were immediately surrounded by ninja guards. With the device suppressing their superpowers, they had to fight while retreating. Just as they were about to be overwhelmed, it was Carmine's turn to shine. In an era without superpowers, he was the most formidable villain. Carmine's guns spewed intense flames, instantly melting the enemies. Meanwhile, Roddy also encountered the Ninja Corps. As the team's tank, he had to sacrifice his life to buy time for Josh. Once the virus successfully infiltrated the system, their superpowers were restored. With their powers back, they quickly defeated all the ninja guards, and the heist proceeded smoothly. However, Casey was not so lucky. As she was about to leave by plane, she was caught on the spot by Praetorian, who had recognized her the day before at the casino, but waited to capture her to draw the enemy deeper. Casey was taken back to headquarters for interrogation, in an attempt to extract the whereabouts of her accomplices. At this moment, Johnny was unaware that Casey had been captured. After the two teams regrouped, they began using their superpowers to clear the remaining obstacles. With the cooperation of Forecast and Sammy, the last door to the vault was opened. However, a corridor filled with traps soon appeared before them. Even Josh's abilities were not spared here. Stepping forward would mean being sliced by lasers. The only way to disable the traps was to shut them down from the inside. This was a corridor filled with deadly traps. where any human daring to enter would be shredded by lasers. However, for Roddy and Sammy, two lawless rogues with the ability to regenerate infinitely, this was just child's play. Even if they were cut into pieces, they could stand up and continue their sprint after regenerating, although the sight of flying flesh and blood was quite stomach-turning. Eventually, Sammy headbutted the switch to deactivate the traps. Now, opening the vault door was all that stood between them and endless riches. Carmine was well versed in this. Often, the finest ingredients require the simplest cooking methods. When they opened the briefcase, the wealth inside left everyone in awe. To commemorate their first successful heist, everyone decided to take a photo to remember the occasion. Meanwhile, Bastard forced Casey to reveal the full plan using a truth serum. It was only when he ordered his subordinates to check the surveillance that he discovered, without triggering any alarm, his treasure had been stolen. Without needing orders, Praetorian, who had randomly acquired teleportation abilities, appeared directly in the vault. Bastard tried to activate his head-exploding power, but Casey desperately stopped him. Fortunately, the 10 minutes had elapsed, and the system suppressing superpowers rebooted. However, even without his superpowers, Praetorian was still skilled in hand-to-hand combat. Johnny was quickly subdued during their encounter. Within a few rounds, everyone except Gladiator was down. As expected, the boss always enters last. Facing Praetorian's attacks, Gladiator easily handled him. After a struggle, Gladiator defeated Praetorian, leaving him completely paralyzed, a harsh punishment for him. With Praetorian's defeat, Bastard knew all was lost. In a rage, Bastard shot Casey in the head to vent his frustration. At that moment, Bastard noticed something off about the details in a painting on the wall. By the time he realized, the person he had shot turned out to be his own butler, while the real Casey had already made her way to the beach to meet Johnny. It turned out that back at the airport, Bastard and his men had fallen for Casey's illusion. To avoid detection of their superpowers, Casey had led them to a cave outside to buy time. Indeed, the master trickster lived up to her reputation. After the mission, each person received $100 million. Carmine started living a luxurious life in his later years. TK traveled the world with his family. Forecast invested in weather satellites to record his abilities. Josh continued to use money to build his business and became the largest real estate developer. Roddy, who was actually a professor, invested all his money in scientific research. Sammy became a charismatic playboy. Gladiator returned to the league, confessed his past, and started a new life. As for Bastard, he was tricked by Johnny again. When Bastard saw the group photo they took in the vault, he mistakenly targeted his successor, Salamander, and shot him without allowing any explanation. Bastard then took back control of the villain network organization. Of course, the happiest were Johnny and Casey. With $200 million, they finally lived the married life they had always dreamed of.